OMG. After 8 years, I realize I'm still obsessed with Tiffany while in love with Angelica. Am I insane for not being able to move on? I am a 20-year-old male, and everyone else in my circle is also either 20 or 21, male or female. Thank you for attending my talk. Summary: you can skip this if you are short on time. Just a heads up, this is all written in its raw form so you can follow my thoughts as they occur. I do not mind if no one reads this. I just felt that expressing myself was a step forward since I feel so lost. Personally, the timing of everything feels surreal. I was just listening to some music and came to the realization that I am far from over Tiffany. I am still deluded enough to believe that a part of me is missing because I will never be with her. For all these years since the 8th grade, I always thought I would eventually end up with her. I have always perceived her in a unique way, convinced that she was meant for me. However, I must clarify that I no longer believe we will ever be together, as she is with Tyler, and I would never want to betray him. Discovering that my feelings and delusions ran deeper than I had imagined has been a revelation. Upon reflection, I realized that I never valued companionship or attractive relationships until she told me she liked me in the 8th grade. It may seem trivial, but I believe this sparked something within me that has lingered. Our closeness during grades 9 and 10 revealed to me the joy of having someone I could talk to freely, as she was my best female friend during that time. It is crucial to emphasize that we were both single then, and I fell for her again. The most significant impact on me was that no one knew I once tried to take my own life due to the depression I felt because of her and another girl, Rachel, back in grade 8. It was such an intense experience that it affected me until grade 10. Then she reappeared and reopened those wounds. I made the mistake of cutting off contact with her in grade 11, a decision I now regret, but at the time, I was indifferent. As I write this, I feel deeply about Tiffany because we shared a strong bond, and I value connections like that, just as I do with Tyler, which stemmed from our shared memories over time. However, I find myself in this awkward phase of life where I feel content and have had a fantastic start to 2025. It appears to be a transformative year for me, and I genuinely want to move past this. I have never wanted to admit it, but she has occupied my thoughts constantly for the past 8 years. I failed to recognize how delusional I had become and how profound the scars from my feelings for her truly were. These delusions exist solely in my mind, or at least I believe so. Even now, as I write, a part of me still perceives her as the one, since I had always thought we would end up together. I am uncertain whether to label this as love or madness, but perhaps I will find clarity in the future. I want to confide in someone, but I cannot do so. I now understand those Reddit posts where people vent to the world. I want to explain how everything I have done in my life, to some extent, has revolved around her. When I needed motivation, it was Tiffany. When I needed a goal, it was Tiffany. When I aimed to excel at the gym, it was Tiffany. I always associated her with my ultimate aspiration. However, in writing this, I am unsure if this is my delusion speaking, as I can envision similar affinities with other girls, but none ever matched the intensity I felt for her. I recognize that I have issues. I realize I am not a good person for feeling this way. At the moment, I am genuinely happy in my relationship with Angelica. She is remarkable and perfectly suited for my lifestyle, but I struggle to feel as strongly attracted to her. I care for her deeply, and this is not a lie. She genuinely impresses me, and I am attracted to her. But I cannot seem to appreciate that fully. I cannot articulate just how perfect she is for me. She understands me, connects with me, and is both my best friend and my partner, yet my attraction to her is not as profound. I think if I had not formed such a close friendship with Tiffany during grades 9 to 11, or if I had not viewed her as the most beautiful girl in the world, I would be able to move on at this moment. Alas, this situation appears it will take time to resolve. I wish I could share these thoughts with someone. I have considered making an anonymous Reddit post. I constantly question myself. I cling to the remnants of shattered memories of her and me. Yet, I feel trapped in this cycle. It was as though fate intervened and told me to move on from her by having her date my best friend. It's like they tried to signal me that I should not dwell on this, as it hinders my ability to live my life fully. I'm turning 21 soon. I have been less than honest in my life like many others, and I vowed to never do so again. and while I haven't sugar-coated anything else, this may be the biggest lie I have ever told. It feels strange that I cannot revel in life the way I should. I am genuinely thrilled about where I am right now. I have had a breakthrough in realizing that if I maintain a consistent positive mindset, I can be happy. That has been going well. Yet, this one issue remains the one facet of my life I cannot conquer. I feel that I have worked diligently and am proud of where I stand at age 20, as my net worth hovers around 750,000 USD, and I recently earned 150,000 USD within the last month. I have made significant strides in my mental well-being this year. Nevertheless, I still cannot find total enjoyment until I resolve this matter. I also want to mention a few important points. I truly love Angelica, but my perfectionism, if I can even call it, that leads me to believe she is not attractive enough for me. I genuinely love her personality, how she treats me and her behavior, but her looks do not meet my ideal. I am a shallow individual. I acknowledge this. I am particularly aware of this issue since it does not solely pertain to Tiffany and Angelica. There is also Karina, another person with whom I can envision a potential future. Oddly, while I consider her one of the most beautiful women I have ever seen, I have never spoken to her. I feel I could envision a future with her just as much, if not more, than with Angelica. I realize I am delusional and foolish. I believe I will move on in time, but is this truly what I desire? I have a few questions after all this reflection for myself presently, for my future self, and for anyone who might ever understand this. Question 1. When Tiffany broke my heart in the 8th grade, did it really leave a scar so profound that the part of me that knows love only knows how to love her in that manner? Additionally, if I ever break up with Angelica, will I feel the same way about Karina? Question 2. How do I move past this? I am currently in a 5-year relationship where I have never connected with someone to such an extent. I spoil her with gifts, love, though I am unsure if this is true love since other women occupy my thoughts, attention, and full loyalty. Should I break up, liberate myself but hurt her deeply? I have been trying to help her grow stronger for herself, and for me, largely because I know this will benefit her, but a small part of me also recognizes I am doing it for myself. Do I work on improving myself and consider seeing other women even if it means potentially losing the best partner for my life? Do I pursue Karina? I am lost on what direction to take. Question 3. What will happen if I enter future relationships that do not work out and leave me scarred again? I know I am stronger now, and that it may not affect me as much, at least that is my hope. Will I regret breaking up with Angelica? I want to reiterate that I despise being so entrenched in this relationship, while also feeling that she cannot be my partner due to her imperfections. I fear making a mistake that I cannot undo. This fear likely contributes to my indecision, as I am unsure if informing Angelica about any of this would be beneficial. This issue has kept me stuck, affecting every aspect of my life, including my discipline and self-improvement. I am still succeeding, and I consider myself smart and capable. Nonetheless, I can confidently state that I remain positive, optimistic, and content as I write this. After articulating this, I realize it will be nearly impossible for anyone to read this and provide accurate, unbiased advice without understanding all the nuances, names, and more details. But that understanding is unattainable unless I am there to explain, and that trust is almost impossible to establish. Unfortunately, this leaves nearly no one who can truly help me. I have ruminated on this for the last 8 years, often alone, and I feel this may be my consequence. I love my life and am forever grateful for the blessings I have, yet I am undoubtedly a confused individual. Story 2. I set a trap, lured my cousin for grandma's jewelry, and watched him lose everything in 30 minutes. Talk about a twist of fate. I do not comprehend legal terminology, so I kindly ask for your understanding. Background story: 25 years ago, my aunt passed away when I was an infant, leaving my 2 cousins, both in their early 20s, to manage on their own. My wealthy grandparents included a clause in their will stating that their grandchildren would receive half of their inheritance if a parent passed away before the children turned 30, with the remaining half to be distributed upon the grandparents' eventual death. Both of my cousins inherited a considerable sum, in addition to the profits from selling my aunt's house. the younger cousin paid off her student loans and successfully purchased a property, on which she still resides. Conversely, the older cousin squandered all his money. In a scenario reminiscent of biblical tales, he found himself back in a condominium and employed as a police officer within 6 years after a complete financial blowout. Our small family was aware of his substance abuse problems, so he struggled to make ends meet on his officer's salary while indulging in excessive drug use. During the subsequent 4 years, my cousin attended rehabilitation 3 times, with financial support from my grandparents. He managed to achieve sobriety after his girlfriend, now his wife, became pregnant. She is an insufferable woman who viewed my grandparents as a source of income and essentially trapped my cousin into fatherhood, believing it would secure her financial future. Within 7 years, they welcomed 3 children, effectively binding her to him. She is a nurse, and with 3 children, they always required additional financial assistance. Guess who they frequently solicited? That's right, my grandparents. Being the generous souls they are, they consistently offered their help. My father, mother, sister, and I quickly grew weary of the situation. Sadly, my grandmother passed away when I was 17, leaving my grandfather as the last remaining grandparent. I was undeniably my grandfather's favorite grandchild, which created tension with my cousin and his wife. I had 2 more years at home before attending college, so I moved in with my grandfather to keep him company and assist in caring for him. My cousin and his wife despised this arrangement so much that whenever they visited and I was not present, they would send their 3 children into my room to wreak havoc. My room had double doors that could not be locked. This marked the beginning of their interference. The longer I resided there, the more they attempted to disrupt my life. My cousin even went as far as to hide a small mechanical noisemaker in a cabinet in my room, which emitted random sounds that made me feel like I was losing my mind. Fortunately, my German shepherd eventually located it after a week of searching. They engaged in these actions to create distance between me and my grandfather, allowing them to swoop in and take on the role of caretakers. This continued until one of the children discovered my firearm. By this time, I was 18 and in possession of a gun. I use quotations because my grandfather owned firearms but was unable to aim and shoot them due to arthritis and nerve degeneration. Therefore, when I moved in, he entrusted me with all the weapons, should a need for self-defense arise. However, if he saw any firearms out for reasons other than cleaning, there would be serious consequences. Being well trained with firearms and taking pride in defending my home, I treated this responsibility with utmost seriousness. I always kept a handgun in a locked container in my nightstand, with the keys safely placed on a high shelf beyond the reach of the children. One fateful day, I was out retrieving food for my grandfather when I returned home to find my older cousin, his wife, and my grandfather staring at a gun on the table. It was my firearm kept in the lockbox, fully loaded with a bullet in the chamber. I typically kept a magazine in the lockbox, but never loaded the gun itself. The lockbox was conspicuously absent. My cousin claimed that one of the children had found the firearm and was playing with it. I was completely convinced that he either acquired the key or broke open the lockbox to access it and load the weapon. As a 6-year-old would not be able to reach a key that I could barely grasp, figure out its purpose, load my gun, and chamber it. I attempted to explain that what my cousin claimed was nonsense and that I never kept my firearms loaded inside the house. However, my cousin, a police officer, scolded me about gun safety and threatened to have me arrested if I didn't leave, stating he hadn't arrested me yet, because we're family. I was asked to gather my belongings and return to my parents' home. My cousin had prevailed, or so he thought. The following day, I apologized to my grandfather and explained that there was no way one of the children could have accessed the key. He agreed with me and offered his apology, but felt it was best for me to move out until tensions eased. He assured me that I would be welcomed back home once things settled down. Our relationship was somewhat strained due to misinformation from my cousin. A month later, my grandfather passed away from a heart attack at the age of 86. I was heartbroken, as I had just begun to reconnect with him and rebuild the trust that had been somewhat damaged. To this day, I remain uncertain of how my grandfather truly perceived me in light of my cousin's influence. Immediately following my grandfather's passing, my cousin and his wife began showering my father with affection, having secured their financial fortune from grandpa and effectively shifting their focus to my uncle. This continued for a month or two, but I refused to tolerate it. Then came the time for the will. My grandfather's lawyer read the will to me, my father, mother, and sister in our home, while my two cousins would receive individual briefings about their shares of the estate, according to my grandparents' wishes. Then the pivotal line in the will came to fruition. If anyone attempts to claim any part of the estate that is not assigned to them, they forfeit any assets they are supposed to receive, which will then be evenly distributed among the remaining family members. This was their way of saying, if you try to claim more than you are entitled to, you will receive nothing. My father was set to receive all the physical property, except for a few items he reserved for me from my grandparents as he was the last surviving child. The revenge I devised my plan. I called my cousin and informed him that all of my grandmother's jewelry was to be donated to a charity auction. My grandmother's collection of gems and metals was extensive, so a charity event wouldn't really mind if a few pieces were missing, would it? It was a colossal bait that my greedy cousin could not resist. He took the bait and rushed over to my grandparents' house, eager to snatch up as much as he could. A few pieces would provide for his children's education. Regardless of my statements, the jewelry was never intended for him, making his actions entirely his own since none of the items were meant to be his. Coincidentally, my father was en route with the lawyer to oversee the situation, as it was merely a formality. According to my father's account, my cousin had 3 shoeboxes filled with my grandparents' jewelry stacked on the kitchen counter, preparing to load it into his car. My father and the lawyer were puzzled by the sight when my cousin emerged from my grandparents' bedroom carrying a 4th and final shoebox. The jig was up, and he quickly deduced that I had set him up, which was indeed the case. However, I faced no consequences for exploiting my cousin's greed, which ultimately caused him to ruin himself. It's worth noting that between the 18 years from my aunt's death and my grandfather's passing, their wealth had multiplied considerably, leading my cousin to feel cheated and expect to receive as much as my sister and I, despite already having received half his share and squandered it. Throughout this entire ordeal, his younger sister, my other cousin, displayed no issues at all and, like the rest of us, mourned my grandfather's death. Just like that, my cousin lost a substantial amount of money in a mere 30 minutes, causing him to question his sanity, all due to his greed. His unlikable wife reportedly filed for divorce a few weeks later. We have not heard from him in nearly 6 years, and he has effectively been shunned from the family. You could view this as a fairy tale ending, and in this part of the narrative, it somewhat is. There was a significant lawsuit later on involving an unidentified family member related to the IRS and FBI. But honestly, I would trade it all to have my grandparents back. Please leave comments if you're interested in the other part of the story, but it's not really centered around revenge. Story 3. At 20, I still can't connect sexually with someone I love after years of trauma, assaults, and the belief that sex is cursed for me. Trigger warning for sexual assault. I have shared bits and pieces of my experiences throughout my life, but I have never revealed the entirety of my story. I feel compelled to express it to someone anywhere. I am currently 20 years old. When I was 13, I developed breasts before many of my peers, and from that point on, I have been subjected to unwanted sexual attention. There has been an overwhelming amount of such attention. When I turned 14, the sexual trauma began. One after another, boys treated me poorly, assaulted me, leaked photographs, and more. I was not very popular in school. I was chubby, awkward, a huge nerd, and a bit annoying. I made repeated poor choices because the initial positive attention I received was focused on my physical appearance. From the very beginning, that was all I seemed to be valued for. I was raped when I was 15. I did not know how to process it. I thought I had met a decent boy, someone I believed had good intentions for me. I confronted him a short while later, displaying unexpected bravery for a 10th grader. He broke down in tears and vomited, and I felt guilty for addressing the issue. Now, I attend the same university as him. I occasionally see him, and we sometimes engage in conversations, which feels strange. I do not understand why we stop to talk, but we do. In my first year of college, I lacked friends and he appeared familiar. It was peculiar. During the remainder of high school, I made an effort to improve myself, genuinely. I forgave my rapist, excused the boys who mistreated me, and tried to understand myself better. For a time, I wondered if I was transgender. I felt deeply disconnected from both myself and my body, resenting my female form to such an extent that I thought that must be the reason for my feelings. Gender has always presented complexities for me, so it did not seem outrageous. I felt a sense of comfort while identifying as a boy. It provided protection from the men who previously harassed me. Uber drivers engaged in casual chats with me, and people on public transport did not stare or follow me. Eventually, I began to gradually reintroduce femininity into my life. It was a phase for me, but that is acceptable. That boy will forever be a part of who I am. One aspect worth noting is my life beyond these events. I was an excellent ballerina and aspired to pursue it professionally. Toward the end of 11th grade, I developed an eating disorder, believing that being thin would enhance my chances. However, losing 15 pounds only confirmed that I would likely always have large breasts. Even at a reduced weight, my breasts remained mostly the same, accentuating the contrast. I recall being 16, struggling with my lowest weight. After attending an event hosted by a friend, I took public transportation home and noticed a man on a bench staring at me. Earlier that day, I had been followed. Perhaps if I had not spoken to him, none of this would have occurred. Nevertheless, I inquired about what he was looking at. The man rose and pursued me for several minutes before I managed to escape. I believe that story is crucial to share. For years after losing my virginity, I refrained from sexual encounters. While there were fleeting hookups during high school, I did not engage in any serious relationships. As I mentioned before, at the beginning of college, I had no friends. I had taken up weightlifting, dedicating most of my time to it, but I lacked companions to share my time with. I would go for days without speaking to anyone, without social interaction, and when I eventually lost interest in the gym, I had days without eating. I developed obsessive-compulsive disorder, ran out of money, and berated myself for the weight I gained after ceasing weightlifting. Near the end of my freshman year, I met a boy in the dining hall. He was tall, soft-spoken, and incredibly funny. We will refer to him as D. After having seen each other a few times, D approached me one evening while I was in the dining hall grabbing a tea. We dated for about a month and a half, leading up to the end of the school year. During this time, we nearly had sex. For some mysterious reason, I could not summon the courage. I figured I was simply nervous, so we shifted our conversation to my relationship with sex. He was understanding, but we parted ways for the summer. He attempted to reconnect with me at the start of the new academic year, but I pushed him away. I remain unsure why. However, we are friends now, and I cherish his companionship above all else. He remains unaware of this, and he also does not know that contemplating what could have happened to me without him frightens me deeply. My deepest gratitude goes to him. Last summer was quite something. I began dating a boy with whom I had one prior outing in high school. He asked me to be his girlfriend, and we had sex a week later. I was thrilled, convinced that I would never experience anything like that again. The following day, he had sex with one of my coworkers, and we ended our relationship a week later. Numerous individuals stated repeatedly that, at least it happened sooner rather than later. While I understand their point, all I could contemplate was how sex seemed somehow cursed. It had to be. Later in the summer, I met a new guy who was kind, tall, a fellow nerd, much like myself, yet I pushed him away. He spent the night with me, we hooked up, and I dismissed him. The encounter was not unpleasant. He performed everything correctly. By that point, I was utterly convinced that sex was simply cursed for me. Then, in September, I met P. P was a friend of a friend. I found him somewhat attractive but knew that nothing serious could materialize, as my family would disapprove of him. We began spending time alone together, and one evening while we sat in my living room, we kissed. 30 minutes later, we were in my bedroom having sexual intercourse. P asked if he could hit me, and for some inexplicable, foolish reason, I agreed. The ensuing 3 months were incredibly dark. We engaged in sex frequently. He was physically assaulting me constantly. Although it remained within a sexual context, I distinctly recall one instance when he struck me too hard. My ears were ringing, and the expression on his face was terrifying. This man thrived on my pain and enjoyed my fear. It was like a chain reaction. Every aspect of an abusive relationship was in place, and I was just anticipating the inevitable downfall. We drank excessively together. His family was also heavy drinkers. I met his entire family during a holiday gathering where I blacked out and vomited. On New Year's, I attempted to end the relationship, but he resisted. He would not allow me to leave, continuously messaging and calling until I had to plead through tears for him to leave me alone. He is blocked now. He also demanded that we engage in sex without protection. I used to be cautious. I used to be wise. I no longer do that. The moment I ceased caring about that is when I lost respect for myself as an individual. I find it unsettling to recount this experience as if it were a genuine relationship. However, P is the first person I have ever consistently had sexual encounters with. He left me with severe anxiety and an alcohol dependency. Living like this for 6 years cultivates a profound sense of loneliness. I have intentionally omitted references to the small flings I had throughout my life. The 3 most recent encounters were with men who, I assure you, I was unaware had girlfriends. I have unintentionally disrupted relationships. I do not consider myself a virtuous person. The awareness of my imperfections, alongside the clear reality that people have only ever utilized me for sex, continues to reinforce the belief that this is the extent of my worth. It is disheartening because I know I have a great deal to offer and possess positive traits, yet I doubt I will ever be capable of engaging sexually with the person I genuinely fall in love with. I cannot allow it to tarnish a good experience when I finally attain it. The moment the individual I love starts to view me in a sexual light, that becomes their singular perspective. I admire individuals who find empowerment in their sexuality. I am one of them as well, but perhaps that is all I will ever be. I suspect I am correct. If you have read all of this, thank you sincerely. I apologize if this seems disorganized. I have never fully articulated all this information before. If you are younger or less experienced than I am while reading this, please prioritize your safety. Take care of yourself, and do not engage in anything that makes you feel uncomfortable. Just because my body no longer feels like my own does not mean that your experience will be the same. You are a complete individual, treat yourself as such. Others will follow. Story 4. Client tried to kick me out, but I coded a self-destruct. He deleted my access, but wiped his own project clean instead. Edit. As many individuals assume this incident occurred in the United States, I would like to clarify that I am from a small nation in Europe. The laws and regulations here differ from those in the United States. We have a governmental agency responsible for company registrations, and it keeps accurate records of individuals involved. If you are a serial entrepreneur who leaves only destruction in your wake, you cannot operate here. Owners and board members must be registered, and if you have a history of unsuccessful ventures or legal infractions, you will be blacklisted by that entity. This is my first post, so please be kind. I have been an independent contractor in the information technology sector for over 2 decades, handling a wide range of tasks from developing basic HTML websites to overseeing the entire IT infrastructure for a large hotel. One of my previous clients, during the time I was programming moderately complex custom websites, was a rental agency. I had received numerous warnings about the owner of the agency. He was known to be exceptionally sharp, deceitful, and treacherous, given his profession as a lawyer. With this information in mind, I entered into the partnership. He was requesting a new website for his rental business, which would allow homeowners to list their properties for rent, renters to sign up and pay a subscription fee, granting him complete control over the process. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. We struck a favorable deal on paper, signed it, and I commenced work on the project. The coding in PHP was progressing smoothly until he suddenly insisted on seeing progress just a week into the project. He demanded to view the front end of the website. This was merely the beginning of the complications. I attempted to explain that front-end work was not scheduled to begin until 6 weeks of back-end programming were complete, and that all I had to present at that time was raw code, as our contract explicitly stated. However, he elevated his tone and insisted that I halt everything to prioritize the front-end design first. Being quite young and somewhat naive at the time, I agreed without adding this change to the contract as an amendment and began working on the design immediately. The contract specified that I had creative freedom regarding design choices as long as I maintained the same color scheme and used the existing logo on the website. I quickly created a draft in Fireworks back when it was a product of Macromedia before Adobe acquired it and showed it to him within 2 days. He was not impressed and demanded a different approach while providing a list of requirements. Ever eager to satisfy the client, I complied with his wishes. I created a new layout according to his specifications, yet he remained displeased. This pattern continued for the next 3 months, a continuous cycle of his discontent. Approaching the 4-month mark, he insisted on viewing a functioning version of the back end. I pointed out that he changed the project's order himself by insisting on the front-end design first instead of the back end, as stipulated in the contract. He responded by stating, "Yes, the contract we both signed states that you will have a working back end for me to see by the end of the month. If you do not fulfill that requirement, I will take my business elsewhere and seek compensation for your unprofessionalism." Now, I had only 12 days to develop the back end for the website. I enlisted the help of a friend, and we labored tirelessly throughout a weekend, providing a solid foundation in 9 days. At this point, he had only paid the security deposit on the contract, approximately 5% of the total amount, and had shielded himself from further payments by claiming, "If you cannot honor the contract, why should I? Complete the requested work, and then I will pay according to our agreement." Recalling all the warnings I had received about this individual, I decided to incorporate a special function into the code for added security. More on that later. At the end of the month, we had a front-end design he found acceptable, and the back end was completed to about 85% of the contractual requirements, with a full month remaining to finalize everything. Time for the demonstration. Since I was developing on my own server, I showcased it to him on his computer. I mentioned that, given my server's 512 kbps upload speed, there might be some lag, but that would not be an issue on his production server at his hosting provider. He agreed, and we proceeded with the demo. As I presented the website, both front end and back end, it was evident that he was extremely pleased, though he would never admit it. He struggled to conceal his grin, and his eyes sparkled with the possibilities for generating income. However, he soon complained that it was too slow, that certain aspects were wrong, etc. Client: "I want you to upload it to my production server so I can evaluate the speed." Me: "All right, I can do that. Please pay 50% of the contract, and I will proceed." After a few days, I received an email from him containing a forwarded message from the bank detailing a transaction he made to me for the 50% I had requested. I then deployed the system to his production server for him to review under beta his domain TLD, and sent him an email with the login credentials. Unbeknownst to him, I was aware that he had been seeking another programmer to take over the project, labeling me as a lazy deadbeat who could not do anything competently. Given that, I suspected he might try to betray me, and I had an inkling that the email with the transaction proof might have been fabricated, which was later confirmed. Pro Revenge won that special function I mentioned. It was designed so that if user X, his user, attempted to remove user Y, my admin account, from the system without changing a specific configuration setting first, the system would delete and purge the database and remove all documents from the webroot. Not 5 minutes after he received my email, he attempted exactly that. He endeavored to delete my admin account from the system to lock me out. Guess who ended up with nothing from the project? He did. Pro Revenge 2, since forging an email, especially one from a bank, is illegal, I reported the incident to the authorities, and he came under investigation by both the police and the bank's legal team. Pro Revenge 3, I sold the system to one of his competitors for a higher price than originally agreed upon with him. The last I heard, he had been blacklisted from owning a company and lost his right to practice law. Ultimately, I was left with just the 5% he paid up front. For over 5 months of work on this project, that is hardly sufficient. However, the knowledge of his downfall will warm my heart for the remainder of my life.